Sean, we have a quorum. I think all committee members are present.
We do have all committee members present, as well as myself, and several visitors are dropping in for us.
Then we can commence with our agenda, the first item of which is the minutes of November 23rd.
I'll move approve, Don.
All right, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second to that motion?
This is Dan, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes? Hearing none, those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the November 23rd minutes are approved. Next item is Middleton Center Phase 3, request to reconsider removal of steel piles from rights of way.
Right.
Sean, do you want to kind of review where we are on this right now?
Sure. Let me at least scroll staff comments up into your screen, and we have several other documents as well. I don't know if you want to look at a map at some point, but just as a reminder, in late September, the committee last talked about this and permitted a lot of the sheet piling and wood bracing between the sheet piles to remain in place, which was right along the edge of the right-of-way. I'll describe it as, you know, partly on private property, partly into public right-of-way, but not likely to be in conflict with anything. So that left just a few isolated areas that the committee was not in favor at the time of allowing to remain in place. But understanding that it might come back to the committee with a modified proposal after the contractor talked to MG&E and they were going to talk to ATC. And so this is the modified proposal that's coming back for reconsideration. And I am going to try to jump to a drawing of where these areas are. So there are three areas. So the one along Parmenter Street, and it's highlighted here in red on your screen, we're calling Area 2, where there were half a dozen piles out, at least partially into the right-of-way and not so far away from an MG&E gas main. And you got the letter from the contractor stating that they talked with MG&E. MG&E's fine with them staying there as long as they would be cut off at an elevation below the gas main. In my staff recommendations, I added in and also at an elevation at least 3 feet below the sidewalk, which was a condition of the other piles remaining in place. Those might be about the same elevation one way or the other. And the other thing that the committee had talked about in late September was requiring then of the property owner some sort of legal arrangement whereby that if there were a future claim against the city from this unexpected stuff in the right-of-way, that the property owner would cover those claims against this abandoned stuff. I don't know what form that would take or how that would, you know, be tracked or considered far into the future. But that's something I'd be happy to talk with the city attorney about. I haven't. So that was you know, one area kind of isolated. Most of this along Terrace Avenue we previously agreed could just remain in place. Area 1 cuts across some easements. So it's not so much that these piles are in the right-of-way as much as they're across easements. So we've got a sanitary main running essentially north-south through this area and a water main running north-south through this area. Over here, some storm sewer. And I still have a recommendation that these then should be cut off at least at an elevation lower than the sanitary main, if they're to remain at all.
Do
Do you know what the invert of that sanitary is?
Not offhand, I don't know.
Because I don't see it on this map at all.
Right.
I didn't hear your question, Carl. Could you repeat it?
Excuse me?
I did not hear your question. Could you repeat your question?
You know, I was wondering what the invert elevation was of that sanitary main. I mean, we're talking about the top of the pilings looks like they're about 926, and the electrical looks like it's about 5 feet lower than that. The sanitary, I assume, is quite a bit, well, it could be quite a bit lower than that also.
Yeah. Would that sanitary sewer ever have to be enlarged in the future?
Well, it might have to be repaired,
Yeah.
probably more likely than it would have to be enlarged.
Okay.
So my concern is just someday far into the future, when we do have to excavate into this area, you know, we're going to deal with a pile here and a pile here, or when this water main needs to be worked on, you know, the pile's pretty close to it. So it's not just about these high power oil filled pipes that are carrying electrical conductors. It's also about these other utilities in the area.
I would think that those type of repairs may have to be done quickly too. So having obstacles in the way.
Right.
Sean, this is Keith with Stevens. That sanitary is at like the bottom of footing, so it's roughly, I think, about 10 feet below 926,
Okay.
somewhere in that area.
All right.
And we did, you know, when we started construction, we jetted and televised that line, and it was in good shape. I can share that with you as well, if you haven't seen it.
I haven't yet, no. I know we normally ask for something before construction and then after construction to verify it remains in good shape.
Yep.
And I haven't seen that yet. My concern is, you know, 20 years from now, 40 years from now, somebody's going to have to dig there. And it's already enough to try to keep track of the electric line.
So am I hearing that the invert of the sanitary is at about 916? Is that what was said?
I think
It's
that's
somewhere near the bottom of the footing of the building. So it's a 10-foot wall. It's somewhere in there, 8 to 10 feet, I would say.
Okay, so the electrical people were concerned about this, you know, undermining, taking the pilings out would undermine the structural capability of those electrical lines. I mean, is that really a concern? What is are those electrical lines enclosed in a pipe? You know, what is the pipe?
yeah. So
They're-
these. Oh, go ahead.
Go
Keith.
ahead, Sean.
I was going to say
There's
these are
69. Yeah.
These are oil-filled
Sorry.
pipes. So they use that oil fill to dissipate heat from these 69 kilovolt lines that are running in here. So they're pretty high energy. And I think the concern was that, from what I heard previously from Tara, these piles would essentially have to be shaken, vibrated to be able to be pulled out, that they go pretty deep. I thought in the ballpark of 30 feet or so. So while they're vibrating these, they were concerned that they would be causing voids in the soil, which would tend to lose support then for the oil-filled pipes and potentially rupture something enough to leak oil anyway. So I think that was Electric's concern, and it's a valid concern as close as these piles are to their pipes.
Have we confirmed that that's actually an electrical concern?
I haven't independently, I do believe it.
Well, just to be blunt, they drove the piles right next to it and it didn't seem to affect the lines.
Right. I mean, this is coming from the transmission company that owns the lines, Don.
Okay.
And if you look at the packet, it's got an email or a letter from that person, but he doesn't he doesn't list himself as an engineer or anything.
Yeah, and I think one of their concerns is, something might show up right away. They have test stations, so they can see if they're losing pressure, but it might not show up for a while either. And
So if we cut the piles off at below the elevation of the sanitary line, which is pretty deep, frankly, it's probably, 6-7 feet deeper than the electrical lines. What is the process for doing that?
They would not be able to be cut off. We'd have to pull them because you'd have to excavate into the street basically to make a safe excavation, and you'd have to support the ATC line somehow, and there's no way to cut them off. You'd have to pull them out.
Okay, so the choice
Okay.
is to leave them as it is or cut them off or pull them
Oh,
out.
wow.
okay. Yeah, and I got this request as I was putting the packet together, so I didn't have a lot of time for analysis. I
Right.
put it in and wrote some staff comments and pushed it out. So if that boils down to two choices, I don't see that it's okay to put this on the water or sewer utilities, future list of concerns. I think then we might as well take care of it now, as had been intended when they were put in.
Scott Zimmerman, are you on at all?
I
And
don't see him.
in area 3, we're talking about a total here of 5 piles as I count them, correct?
Area 3, those piles do not
Area
exist.
3's got
They weren't put
2 and
in.
area 1 has got 3, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, area 3 up by where the water tower was isn't an accurate representation of where the piles are. They weren't installed there. They're not in the easement.
Yeah,
Those two were not installed.
exactly. I saw that in the newest letter that I got Thursday. Previously, this was just shown to me as a record drawing or an as-built drawing, so I didn't, again, have time for analysis or poking around or going out and making a visit. I just put it in the packet, and I thought, if it's not there, you don't have to take them out, and if they are there, you do have to take them out.
So they're not there.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
Correct.
But they were drawn as if they were there, so I didn't even try.
Yeah.
I'll play it both ways.
I think that was their initial drawing that they had, their initial concept, and then they didn't update it when they put the elevations on the side along Terrace Avenue.
Okay, so that'll be the easy part.
In Area 1, when were those pilings put there?
Probably 5 months ago, 4 to 5 months ago.
Yeah, I kind of have the same question Don asked. When they were put there, was there concern about the oil? Was that ever a concern?
Not necessarily when driving them. The issue is when you pull them, the void is going to fill because you're pulling out a piece, material that was in the ground that you're going to have a small little sinkhole basically where that pile's pulled out, because I believe they're 40 foot long. So you have some localized settlement in those areas where the piles are. That's the concern. Is that the thermal sand that surrounds the ATC lines could migrate its way to where those piles were, creating a small like sinkhole almost.
Well, can't they
But this is-
backfill that when they pull them out?
They are back. It is backfilled, but it's those ATC lines are 5 feet below grade, so you're going to have material moving, up to 20 feet below ground, 30 feet below ground.
Has this ever come up in any other project where we've seen, pilings removed and it has disturbed pipes like, in this scenario?
I've only pulled piles up one pile once, and it was about 10 feet tall, and there was a sinkhole that was probably 1.5 feet after it. Typically, like other municipalities will let you leave them in, but obviously I understand this isn't an easement, which could create some future issues.
Right, and I know even at the time that this was initially drawn, our plan reviewer, Rich Weihert, went round about this to say, well, if it gets put in, it's temporary. And we did get assurance that it was intended to be temporary. And frankly, I'm okay with most of them, but I think this is putting a lot on the water and sewer utility into the future to say, I dare you to fix that water main.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the elevation of the water is quite a bit higher. I'm not concerned with, I guess I don't know what the exact elevation is. More concerned with the sanitary and that part of it.
Yeah. But shouldn't you pull the piles and deal with that problem now rather than deal with some problem in the future that we don't understand what that might be? If you pull them out and there's a problem that has to be fixed. That's part of this project.
So yeah, I would
Or
make
you have
oh, go ahead.
there's a significant risk, I guess, associated with pulling them with disrupting the ATC lines, and a huge liability. That's our concern.
I think you're passing the buck. It feels like I'm stuck on the fact that when they were put in, you said they were going to be taking them out, and now it's a problem.
I guess I wasn't a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
That was the
Oh,
developer.
sure. Yeah, probably true.
So.
Yeah, so I'm going to make the motion that we require that in area 1 they be pulled out, area 2 they be cut off, and I am still confused as if there's any pilings in area 3, but I would suggest if there are, okay, if there was even one, I would ask that it also be pulled. That would be my motion, that area 1 then is pulled, area 3 sounds like it's a non-issue, and area 2 they be cut off at least 3 feet below grade.
And lower than the gas main, whichever.
Thank you, and lower than the gas main.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I have a question. Is the motion assumes that for, I can't remember my area numbers now, but the one with the red around it, the one on Parmenter Street, is that area 2? 1? Area 2?
2.
You're still going to get the agreement with the property owner that they will assume future liability for any mishaps in that area.
Yeah, it sounds like Sean needs to have a conversation with the city attorney and then take it from there.
But Bob, thank you very much for bringing that up. That I would like to make sure that that's part of my motion, is that we require that there be basically indemnification on the city by the property owners, that if there's a problem in the future with the pilings that are left behind, that's the city is held harmless.
All right, and that I assume is acceptable to the second?
Yes.
Okay.
I have another question.
Go ahead, Carrie.
In area 2, then that's not an issue to cut them off, the pilings?
They're not as deep. Doesn't have to be 10 feet below grade.
Okay.
And there's no ATC lines there.
Seems like the risk of future problems, it's less in area 2 than it is in area 1.
Significantly.
Is there a reason to cut them off rather than just remove them completely in area 2?
Easier.
I'm just wondering if maybe we would want to just have them removed.
That might be up to the person doing the work, because if they've mobilized to have the machinery there to pull the pile, it may be easier to pull it than to dig and cut.
How exactly did they cut these off below ground?
Sometimes you can't. It'll get excavated down. on both sides. Is the only way to do it.
And then-
And you have to have a safe excavation, which is typically a 1-to-1 slope. So
So I mean, and then it's cut how? The torch?
with the torch, yeah.
And is there some significant risk of doing that close to a gas main?
No,
No? Okay.
no.
All right.
I guess that's, yeah, I was wondering then, do we want to revise the motion to say cut or remove for area 2?
Keith, is that
I don't know.
is that something that you would ever think is better for you guys to have
No,
to
because
pull them?
we'd have to park an excavator in the middle of Parmenter, and it would destroy the road. I'm sure.
Yeah,
Trying to
it's pretty
pull
well
those out.
destroyed already.
I mean, I wouldn't mind modifying it. Which I think would be a good thing to do. But modifying the motion. But I don't really foresee that being an option that anyone's going to take us up on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure to clarify. So that makes sense.
Thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate it.
All right.
All right, so is the motion now modified to say cut off or remove? Is that how we're proceeding with it?
Sure.
I don't think
we could do that. I don't think it's necessary because
Okay.
I think there's nobody really driving area 2 to have them pulled out. The city's not really pushing really hard for that, it sounds like, Sean, to have them pulled out of area 2.
Part of the original approval of this whole thing is that all of this is temporary, but the committee has previously agreed to allow other piles along this same frontage to be cut off. So if the rest of this is going to get cut off, I don't have any objection to these also then being cut off instead of removed. And if the owner / contractor find it preferable to pull them out, I think it's easy enough to just let us know. That, again, was part of the initial staff approval of the plans.
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not going to amend my motion yet again. So to kind of summarize my original motion, which I believe Sean probably has written down, area 1 to be pulled, area 2 to be cut off, area 3 is a non-issue, so we're not going to discuss it in this motion. And tied to all of that, Bob correctly pointed out that part of this motion is also to include indemnification language protecting the city.
Okay. And I think previously, Robert, you had suggested also removal from area 3 if existing.
I did say that, and I've been assured that it's not the case, but sure, if they're there, they should be pulled there too.
Yeah, it's
All
easy
right.
enough to check later. So, okay.
Everyone clear on the motion?
Yes.
Any further questions? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried. All right.
Okay. The next issue up is at the community of Bishop's Bay. You may recall a couple years ago, we had allowed a 2-year deferral on construction of the, what the heck, of the, that's worse, of the water main and sewer improvements. Since then, the economy has taken a turn for the worse. The developer suggested an additional delay would be in order, and I don't disagree. The downside is that just prolongs the risk to our existing utility customers out there that had been counting on this secondary water supply, so that if the single water supply to all of the community of Bishop's Bay breaks, goes out, there is no water in the community of Bishop's Bay. So the developer had initially proposed in phase two's construction that a shorter, what we're calling an alternate connection would be made, but we didn't accept it at that time to come across Highway Q from North Lake and come into the community of Bishop's Bay, largely because it was inconsistent with our master utility planning. But because this intended water loop will be a long time coming, it makes sense, I think, to put in the alternate connection until that bigger connection can be made. The other part of this amendment would be that instead of extending it just for a short term, it extends it for 20 years instead of 2 years. So those are the two main parts of this new proposed amendment, is that there's an extra 20 years to build the regional improvements, but that the developer will construct this alternate loop by the end of 2022.
Sean, can you go back to the picture with the blue and the red line and just
Sure.
confirm my understanding? Is the blue line the original proposed routing and the red line is the short version, or am I totally misreading this?
These are sort of two sketches of concepts that would, either of which would satisfy being an alternate connection.
Okay, so
It's
neither
kind
of
of an
these,
A or a
is
B.
but neither of these is the original, which is a completely different routing, because both of these cross County Highway Q, correct?
Correct. So the other one would come from Pheasant Branch Road to Balzer Road and then all the way over to Bishop's Bay. It's a couple miles of water pipe.
And the alternate connection, is there any financial burden to the city?
This would, well, I mean, other than operations and maintenance, no, the construction would be by the developer.
Okay, and eventually, with sometime within the next 20 years, when the city does the original planned routing, is there anything with this temporary alternate connection that would interfere or increase the cost at a later date to the city?
Well, again, just for operations and maintenance, in the big picture, what we asked the developer in phase two was, please don't build this pipe, because in the long term, we don't need it. The problem is short term is becoming longer term. So if we can't get what we do have approved in our plan, we better get something as a backup.
And I appreciate that. And I don't disagree with that at all. I think something is necessary here. I'm just trying to flesh out the repercussions to the city by moving forward with this alternate connection plan.
Yeah, we might far into the future, when we have the regional network built out, just valve this off, cap it, and not repair it long into the future. Or we might choose to keep it. You know, our more immediate problem is, at some point, the 1 16-inch diameter main that serves this area is going to need some sort of maintenance or repair. And on that day, there is no water in Bishop's Bay.
Right, it cuts everything off until the repairs are made.
And
Right.
can you tell me what the cross street is here for Highway Q? I'm looking at the maps trying to get a
I think it's at Heron Trail.
Heron Trail. Okay.
I think. Yeah, this isn't my sketch. And I know this is a copy of a copy, but I think it's about that far north, give or take Heron.
Okay, so it must be the construction access road where the blue line is going at a diagonal.
Here,
And if he wants to,
yeah.
So it looks like he's going through the, isn't that like sports complex field right there right now?
To the south, I think, is the sports field. I think this is Dave Gross's farmette, sort of. where you see the longhorn
Okay,
cattle
yes,
every
yep,
now and then.
yep.
So there's kind of a gravel dirt drive, and then it comes around, and this is basically built as fire access
Hmm.
and construction hauling.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really, it's not a road that goes anywhere. This would be, I think, St. Anne's Drive at the north end of what's currently built as the community of Bishop's Bay.
The water source is going to the left here, right? It's trying to feed the community on the left side of Q, or is it trying to feed the New Bishop's Bay?
It's trying to be a redundant supply for Bishop's Bay.
For the New Bishop. Okay, good.
Right.
I have it now. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
John, the red line seems to be a far more direct route for this. What's the advantage of the blue line? Why was that chosen as a possible alternative?
I can't recall if there were some property or easement issues between the two. It's been a while since this sketch was drawn. I just know that, you know, to get from North Lake over to this corner of Bishop's Bay, I didn't particularly care what route it took. Again, we were looking at this as being short-term and hopefully not necessary at all. So
Significant construction project to do the blue line.
yeah, the route is pretty open. And you know, through here, I think this might be kind of the north edge of the old unlicensed landfill that became an athletic field. So maybe it was just, you know, do we want to dig a trench through that area, or do we have to get some easement rights from the property just to the north of there?
It's like those property lines abut one another, the farm above and the sports complex field look like they're.
I think so, correct.
There's no property between the two of them.
Right, right. So I'll leave that up to the developer then to flesh out what the better route is from their perspective and propose it in construction drawings. But for now, a sketch seemed okay. Again, we were hoping not to build it, but I think we've.
This is Robert again. Sure. This is Robert again. Is there anybody representing the developer on the line that can speak to this at all? I'm not hearing anybody, so that's fine. And then my next question is for you, Sean. You know, obviously, as you said, if we're approving anything, this is kind of conceptual at this point. At some point, there will be more official drawings that would come back to this body, and certainly come back to Common Council and probably Finance to determine final approval.
Yeah, so this amendment itself will go to Finance and Common Council tomorrow. If Public Works recommends it. And then in the future, as the plans get fleshed out, there will be a city developer agreement for these public improvements that would be a precursor to its construction.
Okay. I have no further questions at this time.
I have a question. What is the current agreement that that the developer would put in the alternate water main?
Well, the current amendment to the 2016 agreement says effectively that will allow a little extra time. All this stuff was supposed to be built by 2019. And then we entered into an agreement that said we just need another 2 years. So make all the 2019s into 2021s.
Yep.
So it effectively, the current agreement says that the city will borrow for financing and cause the construction of both water and sewer regional improvements by the end of 2021, failing anything else. But if the developer needs additional time, that they'll cause this alternate water connection to be built, because we didn't want to just incrementally keep kicking this risk down the road to our existing customers.
All right, any further questions?
Just one other comment, that the alternate route looks like it will go through city property. It looks like the adjoining lots are is Gross and the city of Middleton. are the adjoining properties along that line.
The red
So-
line are you speaking of?
Yes, the red line. So below the line is city of Middleton for most of it. And above the line is the Gross Farm, I think.
That's my recollection too,
Yeah.
right? Mhm.
Okay.
So
John,
this
what
is,
happens if,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead. Oh, I was going to ask a different question, so go ahead.
I was actually going to make a motion to move us forward. So if you have a question, I'll let you
Sure.
answer or get that answered first.
Okay, what happens if, we go ahead and we pass this motion, go forward with this motion and it gets passed, and then 2022 rolls around and we're still not able, like the developer asks for another extension? Like what, is there kind of like a absolutely stop, like I guess, what year would I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, when you talked about the repairs for that water main that's going into Bishop's Bay, potential future repairs, how many years out is that a risk, I guess? Like, is it 10, it's in 10 years it's going to need repairs?
Oh,
Do you have an estimate?
I would always hope that a water main should last 50 years before we need to do something with it. Soils play a big part of that, pressures, that sort of thing. But I think where we're at is what we don't want to do is not even have a handle on that risk by just saying, oh, another 2 years, another 2 years. That becomes a problem because if we're wrong about that initial period of service, that's a really big problem for our customers. So even though we don't really want this pipe, it doesn't look good for getting the long-term regional one anytime really soon. So I'm fine with allowing an extra 20 years. That just preserves the structure of the current agreement that says the city will finance and construct those things for the developer to eventually pay them back. Because absent that, this whole development counted on the developer financing and building those big regional improvements. If this agreement goes away, so does the city's future financing of these things. Again, I know the developer had intended to build this stuff in phase 2, and we asked them not to. And now we're effectively saying, yeah, do, because we can't just live with this risk long-term either.
Okay.
All right, Robert?
I would make a motion to recommend approval of this amendment to the agreement, to make that recommendation to Common Council and Finance.
Okay.
I'll second, Don.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation to council.
All right. So next up, we've got a proposed amendment with CORE for real estate services on Pleasant View Road. It wasn't so long ago, I think it was in August, that we entered into an agreement with them. And in the interim period, while they were getting going, the transportation project plat was being finished up and drafted because property acquisition's on a fairly tight time frame. And now that we have the plat done, and in fact, I hope it was being signed today, we went back to CORE and said, there are some extra parcels affected in this project that we're going to have to deal with. So they worked up this amendment for compensation for the extra scope of work. The original agreement was in the ballpark of $90,000. This one's about an extra $10,000. And in number of parcels, it's about an extra 1/9, or I think, we're adding 2 parcels where we had 18 before. So Gary Huth, who's managing the project for the city, checked that out and talked it over with them. Their pricing is consistent with our existing agreement. So while it's unusual for us to change the scope this early in the game, the overall reason for the changes were that we were still working on the plat concurrent with getting them rolling.
That makes sense to me. Sean, I know the $10,000 additional cost is to pay Core for their services, but obviously their services are representative of negotiating, like purchase of land and stuff like that, correct? Acquisition?
Right. Yeah. So some of them are easement rights and some of them are, actual acquisition of property. Or
do we have a feeling of how much might this burden the city? And maybe it's not the city, maybe it's burdening the state or the county, but yeah, the payment of $10,000 to Core is just the engineering charge, basically, or the service charge.
Right.
Are we going to get hit with a $500,000 land acquisition bill after this? I'm just trying to, like I said, I actually think this makes complete sense to move forward with this. I'm just trying to understand what might be the incremental charge to the city for the acquisition that occurs after Core does their work.
That is going to be the big part of it, the big dollar part of it.
Right.
I don't have a ballpark estimate from Core or anybody else right now, but that's going to be orders of magnitude bigger than this.
Absolutely. And do you recall, is that something that's paid for, at least like a large percentage of it, state or county funds for that? Because this is
I
all.
think it's included in the budget for the work.
It's in the overall project budget, a big part of which is federal funded through the MPO. So the city of Middleton and the city of Madison are in a two-party agreement. The city of Middleton and the state of Wisconsin are in a two-party agreement. And a big chunk of this project's funding is coming from the federal government.
Well, either way, I think we have to move forward. And Carl, thank you for that comment. It's right on point, and I have no further questions at this time.
I have one nitpicky comment, Sean. The Core is defined as a consultant in the first paragraph, and on the signature page, it defines them as a developer.
Well, that's not right.
Robert, where are you?
Yeah, that doesn't sound at all nitpicky. That's just wrong.
Susan, are you teasing me?
Yes, I am.
I did not catch that. Carl, thank you for catching that. That's a very good catch.
Yes.
Okay, so I would make sorry to just jump in here. I would make a motion to recommend approval of this amendment 1 to the agreement with that change that they should be consistently called, I assume, a consultant.
Yes, they should.
Including on the signature page.
Yeah. On the other hand, if they want to develop it, I might let them.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second to Robert's motion?
I'll second, Carl.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is carried, and that is what we will recommend to the Finance Committee and the Council.
All right, great. Next up, we've got preliminary design and nearly final design for the reconstruction of Hubbard Avenue, Mayflower Drive, and a couple of side roads at Violet and Orchid.
I think we're up, Con.
Hello? Okay. I know that we have Terry Meyerhofer here, and Rich Weihert also is on the call. He's our project manager for this. So I don't know if there's anything to preface what we need to talk about. The two biggest policy issues that we had identified in staff comments were, number one, potential sidewalk connectivity, pedestrian connectivity to the Parisi Park trailhead on Mayflower Drive at the north end of this project. And then there are a couple of options for that. And then secondarily, how to manage the project budget, the project scope with respect to the project budget, I should say. I don't know if any committee members noticed anything other than that that we should focus on.
Committee, any other issues that anyone saw?
None.
Maybe
No.
let's dive into the sidewalk stuff first then,
Yeah.
if you want. It might be the harder part. So, oh, and I know too, Ann Fisher is here with interest in the sidewalk that's being considered along Mayflower Drive. I just got today minutes from the Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Transit Committee. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read their motion just so the committee has that in the background for discussion purposes, which was from December 9th. And that motion was to recommend to the Public Works Committee that the Mayflower Drive Road Reconstruction Project include narrowing the roadway and sidewalks added along the west side to the entrance to Parisi Park, and that no mid-block crosswalks are added. Crosswalks at intersections only. These are draft minutes, again, just received this afternoon. So Susan, I think you were at that meeting.
Yeah.
If that
That's
seems inaccurate, feel free to let us know. But that's what I got. And I know that at that,
correct.
okay, thank you. And I know that at that meeting, several residents were in attendance and spoke opposed to construction of sidewalk or narrowing of the road, to just leave things the way they are right now. So I want to pass that along as well. Terry and her team had drawn up two options, two alternate alignments along the west side of Mayflower Drive, one of which in part is sketched here from Boulder Lane North to the Parisi Park trailhead. I don't know if, are people familiar with that where that path comes out from Parisi Park to Mayflower Drive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
So that would be the end of the sidewalk for right now, essentially just to link most of the southerly neighborhoods to that entry to Parisi Park, but not further up Columbus. That's a design decision for a different day. And Rich had laid out a couple of options for maybe how to do that prior to getting the Ped Bike Transit Committee meeting. So what Terry and team drew up was sort of the full west side proposal. And they drew up a couple alternates, one that sort of just follows the public right-of-way like a standard sidewalk would, and the other that tries meandering around a little bit for a variable terrace width, but to try preserving trees as best as possible. We'll call that the orange route. The other one would be, since there is already sidewalk on the east side of part of Mayflower Drive up here, to just cross the street of Mayflower, just north of Boulder, and then go up the west side. And that alignment, again, could try to preserve existing terrace trees as well as is feasible. Or to go up the east side, which I don't think has trees, though it has a utility pole and some guy wires, and then effectively a mid-block crosswalk that would lead right into Parisi Park. Where I was most hesitant as staff is that this is near a curve, and I'm not a huge fan of mid-block walks under good conditions, but when they're near a curve, I just shudder a little. So I was not enamored of the idea of the green route, and I understand that Ped Bike Transit wasn't either.
No.
Susan, could you let us know, was the overall intention, and I couldn't get it from the minutes, to come from all the way from Maywood Avenue up the west side of Mayflower to Parisi, or just from Boulder north?
I think it was just Boulder North,
Sort of the blue route, if you will?
the blue route.
Okay. That
I mean,
seems
it's
the
sort of
least
a-
intrusive.
Yeah, this was a compromise. So the crosswalk went across at a intersection and being least intrusive on individuals. So the blue route will affect two in a tiny portion of somebody else's lot.
Right, and so that's why, you know, Rich clipped just this piece of the project drawings, and we highlighted in yellow where the survey locations of trees are, so that we could get a handle on what some sort of worst case tree impacts are. Again, this is all in the public right of way. I totally understand that people will consider this their front yard, but I do want to remind folks that we're really just talking about public property here, not private property.
And can we look at how many times individuals would have to cross the street under the different scenarios? It seems like anyone that is west of Mayflower Drive is, you know, 2, maybe 3 extra street crossings to get to the Parisi Park Trail, which is what this sidewalk seems to serve.
There are a couple of ways to get there.
Yeah.
You know, for people that are far enough west, there's an interblock walk that already goes into Parisi Park from the south. But you're right. So if somebody here, well, maybe across the street, because here you could just sort of walk into the park, I guess. But I think what you're saying, Dan, and what I'm hearing is, well, you'd have to cross the street to walk here, to cross the street, to cross the street to get here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good observation, you know, that we're trading some construction of some public sidewalk. What we're trading against that is, from a certain angle, people have to cross the street multiple times to do that.
If you use the orange route from Boulder south, Sean, how many more trees are impacted along there?
I'd have to go to the drawings to pull that up. There are some.
I believe it would be 3.
3. Thanks. That's Terry Meyerhofer for the committees.
And would we replant, Sean?
We typically would, yes. Now, I think it's obviously a fair point that when you take down a mature tree, you can't plant a mature tree, but the city clearly does favor terrace trees. We also favor having people walk someplace not in a street if we can.
Yeah, I think, the orange seems like the best option to connect the paths, and kind of what we talked about before is to having sidewalks on both sides of the street seems preferable.
I agree. That's something that in the past this body has said is desirable.
Is the right-of-way along that stretch, Sean, sufficient that the sidewalk could meander a little bit and not impact all of the trees, or is it a fairly narrow right-of-way? I'm not familiar.
I think it's a pretty standard right-of-way, which is normally like 12.5 or 13 feet from the curb to the right-of-way line. That's all still public, so that by the time we build a sidewalk, we still have, 7 or 8 feet of grass in which to put trees.
And are these trees that would be impacted within that 7 or 8 feet, or are they ones that would have to come down?
I'm seeing a couple down by Maywood that look like they would be in a good spot to be terrace trees. And then, let me,
I don't want to. That takes away more of our yard. I know.
having a hard time
Sean, while
panning
you're
for
looking,
whatever odd reason.
Sean, could I say, one of the concerns that we heard from the citizens at the Bike Ped meeting was preserving the trees to preserve the ambience of the Sachs Woods neighborhood, which is a neighborhood with very old, gorgeous oak trees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also there are a lot of streets there where in that neighborhood that don't have sidewalks. And I will say last year we approved not putting in sidewalks, I'm fairly certain.
On
I
Wood
forgot the name
Road,
of the street.
Wood Road,
Yeah, Wood
which is
Road.
just
Road.
west of
Wood
Branch
Road.
Street. Actually, the Public Works Committee, I thought, endorsed sidewalks, but the city overall did not.
Correct.
There is also a path, not a sidewalk, but a path that goes across, perpendicular to Maywood, that accesses the park.
This is Galaxy S20.
It is.
Yes.
We
So
are
you're
the Allen family, and you're talking about our yard.
So this is the path you're describing
2400.
that's further west from here? That
Yes.
goes into the south side of Parisi
Yeah, it
Park?
comes off that other sidewalk.
Sure. Yeah, that's the
So-
one I had mentioned earlier.
Okay, so why is that okay not to be paved or have a sidewalk?
Wood Road.
Oh, well, I can't speak to that. I think that the Public Works Committee did endorse a sidewalk with some design modifications to the road. I think the city overall in the end didn't endorse that, but I can't say why.
I just talked to folks at one person at Wood Road, and because I explained what was happening with our neighborhood, suggesting, and she said they got a group of the people in that neighborhood, and they made virtually, everyone was opposed to having sidewalks because it basically ruined the feeling of Sachs Woods area and that neighborhood. What is there now is perfect. It's not a well-traveled street, and there are nice, mature trees there. We've lived here for 30 years, 30 plus, 33. We were kind of the new couple in the neighborhood, and I am vehemently opposed to having a sidewalk there, because I think it takes away a lot of what this neighborhood is, and the saving of the environment and the Sachs Woods area. It just is whole part of the nature preserve. It all extends into it. I think it would affect our neighborhood.
And I think it would affect the wildlife. We have hawks, we have owls, we have deer, fox. It all come up from the nature preserve. Turkeys. You know, this is a place where they feed. We have frequently seen them in our backyard. I'm vehemently opposed to it as well, because I think there's an environmental impact on both Pheasant Branch, on the habitat, the animal habitat, and aesthetically, this is Sachs Woods. And the fact that Wood Road, that area doesn't have sidewalks, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, that's, you know, there are ways to access this park. Have you bothered to do, put out a strip and test how much traffic comes through here?
It's primarily the neighborhood,
Mhm.
because
It's not their
the only
street.
people that are not in the neighborhood that drive through this woods basically, or for around this area, is because there's a traffic pile up at the lower end.
North side.
It's the north side. It just,
But
this is basically a neighborhood street, and people in the neighborhood use it.
same with, you know, this isn't a high traffic area. I would actually ask that we take like 6 months and monitor the traffic to see actually what huge risk there is in crossing the street here. You know, we have lived here for 33 years. Kids come through school from way down the street and walk across the road, and no one has been hit out here. Nothing dangerous has happened in this area. And you know, if you're going to put something in, why don't you put in the green strip that connects from Boulder? It's a shorter area. It's less expensive. You aren't taking out any trees. And if your worry is that it's too close to the corner, then monitor it and see what kind of traffic we have.
And I'd also, in your plans for 2 years down the road, you're looking at Boulder Lane, putting in sidewalks.
Boulder has sidewalks. You're talking about
What's the next one over?
Columbus.
Columbus, excuse me. Columbus, on both sides of this of the street, sidewalks, and that will be a major difficulty in that group of people too. And you will get a lot of feedback and negativity of proposing that in 2 or 3 years, whenever it's supposed to be done.
I agree. We've never been in a neighborhood without sidewalks that comes begging for them or doesn't oppose them.
Well,
that's true.
What is Wood Road?
Yeah.
Isn't that the same situation?
Again, I look at this from a staff perspective of what we're building and how we're trying to connect people, pedestrians, not in a road. The city council may be looking at something else, but I'm looking at this from that connectivity perspective.
Well, there are ways to connect it. If you did it on the other side, where you're talking about only one piece of property and a small portion of the other, there is no loss to trees. It would be less expensive for the city. And I would also like to say that I don't want this sidewalk, if you insist upon it, to be meandering around my trees, which actually does cause a loss of my yard.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I see that Ann Fisher has her hand up.
Yep.
Could she
I
speak
love that
to?
feature.
It is a nice feature, yeah.
Yes, it is. I just wanted to echo the concerns of my neighbors too, particularly in regards to our position close to Pheasant Branch. And we consider ourselves rather a gateway to that Pheasant Branch area. And I know with the draft 2020 plan, there's quite a bit of verbiage about preserving areas and character. And Sachs Woods, I think, is one of those small areas where that consideration needs to be given. I do understand that we have in that draft the recommendation to obviously look at, you know, the whole scope of a road project, such as should we put in sidewalks, what needs to be changed with crosswalks in an area. And the recommendation to improve connectivity and put in sidewalks is a policy recommendation, but it's not like the rubber stamp of if there's no sidewalk, there should be sidewalk. I think this is one of the rare exceptions that the functionality has been good here. There have not been incidents of safety concerns, and other options such as not having parking along the west side of Mayflower could be looked at. Better markings on the roads too, I think could be done. I think of it in terms of the potential loss of green space and diverse tree canopy. We've just lost about 1,500 trees to the emerald ash borer, and the idea that we would impact the Sachs Woods in such a way is really devastating to us as long-term residents, like my neighbors, James and Connie. We've been here about 30 years. And I can tell you, after raising 3 kids here firsthand, looking out my kitchen window every single day, every night, there is not a traffic problem out there with people utilizing Mayflower Drive to access Parisi Park. There are 2-3 different ways you can access Parisi Park that don't include walking down Mayflower Drive. And those are easily accessible too.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments too. I would like to go back to Bob's question of how many trees are impacted with the orange proposal.
So, the orange one being the one that goes all the way from Maywood Avenue up to Parisi Park.
Yes.
Along the full west side. So I think there's 2 trees down near Maywood that probably would be okay. And then there's a couple trees up near Boulder that we'd have to take a more careful look at. I don't know right offhand if we could feasibly go around them, to duck in between the curb and these trees, or if we'd be better off going through here and putting in different terrace trees on a better location with respect to them being in the terrace. And then up here, there's one more tree that looks like it's maybe right on the property line that I am pretty confident we could just deviate a little bit on the alignment of the sidewalk and get up to the path. So I think likely 2.
Yeah, I think, Sean, I would agree with that. I think the 2 that you're talking about, the one that's farther south, is labeled as a 4-inch diameter Black Hills spruce.
One of these.
The one, sorry. So let's go to. We would be at station about 514.50 left. So.
One of these 2.
Yeah, those 2 would likely be impacted. I think that if we were to try avoiding them, it would just cause for a headache maybe in 5 years or so as the trees grow. I think they're just too close to the middle of the right-of-way right now to avoid them on the back end or the front end.
To go one way or the other. Yeah, and I know we have an ordinance that disallows evergreen trees for basically that reason. They get big and there's no space for them in a terrace.
Did you say those are both black spruce or some kind of spruce?
One of them is a Black Hills spruce and one of them is a 16-inch diameter red elm. The elm is farther north and the spruce is farther south.
Okay. Thanks, Terry.
Okay.
And then
is there any?
Go on.
Nope. Keep going.
I was gonna just explain the trees that are closer to Maywood Avenue.
Down here.
Those trees. Let's talk about station 512. Yeah, left.
Okay.
So the farthest south one is a Colorado spruce, and same with the one just to the north of that, another Colorado spruce.
Oh.
And then those would also, just because of the nature of the tree, would be a little tough to avoid. However, if anything, you could make the terrace width very narrow and put the sidewalk very close to back a curb to try to avoid it.
Okay. So thank you. That helps a lot because I think I definitely worry about trees too, especially older trees, oaks and things like that. But in my mind, if these are spruces, things that are maybe not as I don't know, I don't want to say valuable, but in the sense, so we could replant something else. It seems like that would be okay. And my other question, Sean, is this also where we would maybe potentially narrow the road to avoid those trees in the first place? Is that another option?
I think that was one of the recommendations that came out of Ped Bike Transit was let's narrow the road and build a sidewalk on the west side, and presumably narrowing the road is to make the terrace even bigger.
Yeah.
But again, I think if we talk to the forester, the reason that we don't favor evergreen trees in rights of way in the first place is they spread out a lot. So they start hanging over curb lines or hanging over sidewalks.
And just visibility.
Right. So instead of having
on how low the branches are.
With canopy up top, you basically have the canopy at the bottom, you know, and it gets smaller up near the top. And it looks like there might be an overhead wire here to be concerned with anyway. So we might need to look at that with the forester anyway, just on its own merits as to whether these trees.
I was going to suggest that it would be a good idea to have Mark Wagner look at those trees anyway. I'm not acquainted with those trees. Are they healthy trees? There are a lot of diseased spruce trees around the city that are coming down. And I don't know if those fall into that category or not, but there is some blight that is impacting a lot of spruce trees in Middleton. I don't know if those are.
Yeah, that's a good point too, Bob. I'm definitely in favor of narrowing the road, because then we're kind of, you know, maybe it's creating more of a win-win situation where we're narrowing the road. If we want to preserve those trees, like you were saying, Bob, if they're healthy, if they're not causing a problem, we preserve them. If they're causing a problem, maybe that's a separate issue. But then we're then able to install a sidewalk that would serve the purpose of connecting pedestrians to the park and to the neighborhood in a safe way, so that people aren't walking in the street. And then we're still kind of preserving the character of the neighborhood as well.
Right, and before we cut down any tree, we talk to the forester if that's a good idea, or if we go around it instead. You know,
if you narrow the road with that would force parking on one side of the street or something, then, right?
Right.
Okay. Yep. Which I don't think there's a lot of cars parking there, is there?
No.
The times I've been there, yeah, it's pretty wide open.
Well, we
get a lot of parking.
That would also assure slower traffic too, with the narrower streets.
Right.
I think it typically helps. Yeah.
Some people
It
slow
does.
down.
It does in Middleton Hills. We've got real narrow streets.
And I think narrow streets, I agree with that, Susan. I think there's a perception of slowing down, and I think it just creates more green space potentially with the wider terraces and things as well.
It does. It puts a lot of terrace area up there.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has less runoff, less blacktop to maintain, you know.
Right.
If we don't need parking anyway, why bother?
I would also like to say narrowing the street, I don't think it's going to impact the concept of the Sachs Woods area. I'm having a little bit of trouble in that we didn't put in sidewalks on Wood Road. We didn't put them in on the other side of the creek on Brookdale and Forest Glade. So just in terms of what we've done previously, I'm having a little bit of a problem. I do not want to see any mature oak trees or other hardwood trees removed. Again, for environmental reasons, certainly at the stormwater utility and water resources. One of the big things that keeps coming up is how can we increase transpiration of water? Because we have a very high water table now. And those trees are excellent ways to get transpiration, in addition to some infiltration. So we don't want to lose the trees.
Well, and I think, Susan,
Go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, Susan, I think some members of the committee probably disagreed with some of those decisions that were made
That might be
about
true,
not putting
but-
in sidewalk. And I think it was a big debate. And I think, again, it's like on a case by case basis that this question always comes up. So I think it's my preference anyways, that we install sidewalks on both sides of the street so that pedestrians aren't walking in the street, especially if it doesn't impact trees or, you know, some of these other things that maybe have come up in the past that, you know, that ultimately the city ruled in favor of not installing sidewalks. But I think we should go in with it with the perspective of, let's install sidewalks if it makes sense, if it doesn't impact trees. I agree with you. If this whole street was dotted with oak trees, 100-year-old trees that we'd have to take down, I maybe wouldn't be, you know, we'd have to really take a look at that. But if there's not a big impact, I think sidewalks are a good thing.
I tend to agree. I think there could be a win-win here. If we're potentially recommending narrowing a street, basically just extending making the terrace wider, so we're not really cutting even into the terrace much at all, if at all. We're just basically extending into the road and making that a larger terrace with a sidewalk. I think that would make a lot of people fairly happy, and it gives us the access that we're talking about wanting for bicycles and pedestrians and people in wheelchairs and whatever.
The only other question I have, Sean, is narrowing the roadway, does that add significant costs to the project? Because we're looking at having to do this perhaps in phases anyway, because the budget or the projected cost came in above what is budgeted. But I mean, if you have to take out a bunch of good curb and gutter and reinstall it somewhere, that's going to add a significant amount to the project, it seems to me.
It will have an upfront cost because we're replacing curb and gutter, then that's in good shape otherwise, and we're moving storm sewer structures around that way. Longer term, there's less asphalt pavement to maintain. There's a little less to put in initially. So yes, it does have a higher construction cost, but in the very long term, it should have some mitigating factors too with maintenance.
Okay. All right, committee, where would you like to go with this?
I would like to make the same motion as bike ped, where we enlarge the street.
Narrow the street.
Yes, I mean, narrow the street, yes. I'm sorry.
The bicycle pedestrian team didn't say widen the street.
No, but
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So
Widen the
to be more specific, if you're making the motion, are you suggesting that this goes all the way, what was that, Mayflower, Maywood? This is Maywood.
Along the west side of Mayflower, north of Maywood to Parisi
Yes.
Park?
So basically the orange, are you talking about the orange path?
Yeah.
Okay. So the orange path recommended, and with a narrower road so that the sidewalk would be more
Sean,
into the
could you
street.
bring up the orange path again?
I think I can.
Just to, thank you, Susan. It's just to help me make sure I understand your
Yeah,
motion.
this is where I'm having trouble. Where I was widening.
Well,
the street.
am I correct to think that the sidewalk would be on both sides of the road here then, or is it?
There is already a sidewalk on the.
So this
I
would
guess I'd call it the
exist.
east
That one
side.
exists.
Side of the
Okay.
road?
And this would be constructed then.
And the green would not exist then.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, that's all right.
And where the orange is shown currently is right in the middle of the terrace, but what we're talking about is shifting that more toward the street because it really is, we're cutting into the street more than we're cutting into the terrace.
So you still might have to do something where Boulder Road comes into that. I look at the sidewalks and I don't see the sidewalk extending to like to Maywood Avenue, Mayflower Road. Do we have to touch that corner so that people coming down Boulder can go straight to the orange sidewalk?
Yeah, I think we'd want a crosswalk on one side or the other.
One side or the other. Okay. You see what I'm talking about, how that, it doesn't look like
It's
the
not there
side we
yet.
can see, it's not there.
Why
Right.
can't there be a crosswalk there on both sides?
Typically in a T intersection, we just put them on
You
one
just put
side,
one. Okay.
typically.
Sean, there is no sidewalk at all now along the east side of Mayflower, north of Boulder?
Up here, and as it blends into Columbus, none
Yeah.
yet. Nope.
No sidewalk there, okay. But there is sidewalk south of Boulder,
Here there is.
Yes.
okay.
I'll second Susan's motion.
So that's to narrow the roads, sidewalk west side, and to talk with city forester about trees.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Can I make one more comment? This is James Allen.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
I can
Yes.
hear you.
Yes?
Okay. If this is the start of this and you go down Columbus and there's sidewalks according to the future plan on both sides of the road there, and I don't think that group of people who live there is going to like this at all. And for the same reason that the 4 residents you're talking to don't, I don't think there's a problem with traffic, speed, or anything else. It's a closed neighborhood pretty much. And if this is the first step in proposing this sort of thing, you can say, well, we've already put it in up to Parisi Park. I think everyone on Columbus is not going to want this to a person. And I was planning on talking to the people in this area because I don't want this to extend further. I don't think it's needed. It is a safe neighborhood. There's not traffic per se. It is neighbors going to other neighbors' house or coming to and from work. I appreciate a great deal what happened with Woods Road, and I think it's perfect. And I would like the same for our neighborhood. It's nature. Let it be as well as we can. There's a lot of trees further down on Columbus Drive that will have to be gone through. There's high levels of elevation, so sidewalks are going to be very difficult and expensive to put in there. I don't know.
Well, thank you for your comment. I mean, we will face the next portion several years down the road when we face the next proposal for road reconstruction, but.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned about the protocol for this meeting because I don't know when we're able to interject a concern. This is Ann Fisher, but I just don't think this committee has a good visualization of this area because it's not 1 or 2 trees that maybe are going to come out.
Yeah.
And it's not a change of a little bit. There are 2 huge evergreen trees right between my property and James's that would have to come out. And there are many small trees and improvements there that would have to be severely disrupted and not replaced. It's not a small addition and it's not a small change. It's a tremendous shift in the way this neighborhood looks and feels. Mm-hmm. And I'm disappointed that the committee, is that fact seems to be lost on everybody here. And it seems to be a pretty done deal that somebody created this plan and a couple days ago we heard about it. And now we're getting an opportunity to express our deep concern. It's not a little concern, it's a big one. And again, very disappointed that a committee is ready to take a motion with, I think, little information. I don't think that you have an accurate picture of this area, and there are multiple access points to Parisi Park if what we're talking about here is connectivity to Parisi Park. There are 3 different other areas off Maywood that you can access Parisi Park.
All right. Thank you for your comment. Understand that this is a recommendation from this committee and that we are a step in the process and not the final one.
Okay.
I have one
That's
thing to
helpful.
add. Excuse me. Go ahead, Ann.
I can't tell who's speaking or has a hand raised or anything, so.
Well, the Allens have a hand raised.
Okay.
And Ann can continue talking.
No, I was done, Connie. Go ahead.
Okay. I just, I agree with Ann, you're making assumptions about the traffic and the dangerousness of this area without any of you looking at it, without making any effort to see how much traffic really is here. This is a huge impact with very little issues. There's nothing that's happened here. No one's been hit in this area walking on that piece of the street. Furthermore, all over the city, our city in Madison, are bike paths that are just marked with a piece of paint that say bike. What would be wrong with putting a bike path out here that didn't involve sidewalks, and instead of narrowing the street, make a designated marked off area that's called a bike path, so there is a safe option for people to walk.
Well, I mean, that's not anything that is before us at the moment. You still, I mean, I understand that, but you would still be walking on a street with traffic, which is a little different than walking on a sidewalk.
There's virtually
I think
no
the one
traffic.
thing to consider too is that we have to think of all citizens, elderly citizens, those that may be in wheelchairs, and sidewalks in a city are very important. And so
But there
would we?
are other access points that have sidewalks.
Well,
We have to look at the
future. We have plowed before, and
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate people's comments, but we need to move along here a little bit. And I think we've gotten some good input from the public who has attended the meeting, and I think we need to move forward with our agenda here. So I'm going to stop discussion on this at the moment. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion from committee members? Hearing none. You're up to date on the motion that was made?
Right, so Susan moved essentially the same as the Ped Bike Transit Committee did in recommending narrowing the street, designing a sidewalk on the west side of Mayflower from Maywood north to the Parisi Park trailhead, and to consult with City Forester about terrace trees affected and or that should be considered for removal on their own merits.
All right. Any further discussion, committee members? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that will be our recommendation to the Common Council.
Well, and this is guidance for final design. I would say this is all preliminary design.
Okay.
So we're intending to come back to the Public Works Committee on January 11th with final design.
Final design? Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Very
I
good.
would also like to say the citizens will have the opportunity to speak before the Common Council, who makes the final decision. So you will have another opportunity to speak.
I appreciate you recognizing that we would be interested in that.
And the Allens apologize for doing this not very well because I've never done a Zoom before.
Well, you got in. That's half the battle.
That's half the battle.
You actually did quite well. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank
Made
you.
it from another galaxy. That's quite well.
I want to know how
I'm very happy that we hear from the public and that they take the time to talk and tell us these things. So we have a perspective from it today, and thank you.
Yep.
Right.
Thank you.
The second issue for which we're asking guidance is about budgeting. So it's scope of work and guided by cost estimates. So I always caution these are just cost estimates. They're subject to change as we get to final design. But right now we have budgeted dollars, and we've got a cost estimate that exceeds those budgeted dollars for both the road and the water improvements. So one suggestion is to trim out and bid as an alternate scope a portion of Mayflower Drive, maybe north of North Avenue or north of Maywood Avenue, and tie that into a future project if the bids come back such that we can't build it next year, in 2 weeks next year.
If I might jump in, Sean, my concern really is if we now change the scope of the width of Mayflower north of Maywood, and the cost increases for that, I don't think are going to be better for this situation at all at this point, and further being below water on the budget.
I think, I don't mind letting the estimate fall where it will, and then showing that to the committee. I don't mind bidding it as an alternate. I don't think it's a huge exercise for the contractor to bid that as an alternate. And if we're pleasantly surprised, so much the better. Were you advocating, Rich, that maybe we should just pull part of this project out now?
Only given the decision of Bike Ped and now Public Works to narrow that road, I think that would be better served if you're going to push that, tie it together with Columbus construction in 24 or 25 and do a whole complete street for the whole complete road, I guess, because it does turn into Columbus.
Okay. So that's a valid thing for the committee to consider as well, to just pull it even from the final design and just not even consider it right now.
If we were to do that, are we under budget by a lot? Because obviously we want to not burden the future years with a bigger project and have leftover money this year. But if cutting it out now and kicking the can down the road a little bit actually makes sense for load leveling, is what I call it, that's not a bad option.
Yeah, and actually, Robert, after our last budget discussions at council, which neither one of us are on the budget committee, finance committee, this would free up the money to be sure we can get Marigold done and not have to make concessions in other places in terms of chip sealing and all of that.
Very valid point. I just wanted to understand if, because I can't do math on the fly, I'm not a quick thinker. If this was not to be proposed for 2021, I know it's a little over budget already. If it's struck completely, how much money would we be under budget, and where would that money be? What would the proposal be to get a little closer to hitting budget?
Well, they're estimates.
Yeah, well,
so I can't tell you.
Okay.
You just go by the lineal footage, which, like Sean said, it's a pretty glossed over way to look at it. Just with the lineal footage, you would be saving $238,000 to take out the stretch
From Maywood?
North of Maywood. Yep.
Okay.
Gary, does not to interrupt, does that include water main and sanitary? Because really the biggest budget concern is the street portion of it.
That would include water main and sanitary. That lineal footage cost is.
And that's in the ballpark of where the estimate was over by about 200 plus.
I like the idea of this because to work on a small section of the road, we don't have a nice flow then. be a discontinuity between.
The narrowing would be a,
Yeah.
a
If you did the
hassle.
whole, if you did that whole Columbus Drive, Mayflower Drive from Branch to Maywood as one project, I think the end result would be nicer and it would be consistent.
Yeah,
I
I like
agree
that
with
idea
that.
too. I agree, Dan. Like Daniel, I think that is true. It'd be consistent because it's already curving around to Columbus, so it would be kind of an abrupt change.
You'd have a curve and you'd have the end of a curve and a narrowing, which would be kind of odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be 1 year's budget for streets, pretty much, if you did it that way, but that's the way to look at it.
So to take out the water and sewer from the equation and do just a lineal footage for the road costs, not including water and sewer, then you're talking about saving just in the street budget 129,000 about. Again, that's a very rough estimate on the fly, but gives you an idea.
Thank you.
I thought of something, but I can't remember it now. I like the idea of doing it all as one project. And this would be in several years so we could let citizens know. And since we're not going to have this very dedicated 5-year plan where there's a little bit of flexibility, this would help. The other thing is we can have the city forester look at the trees entirely up and down this whole street and really give us a good idea before we do a whole lot of planning as to the impact. You know, with widening the road, I don't see we're going to need to take out anything other than maybe at most trim up the evergreens so that you can still see around them at the base.
Well, if that's where people want to go, what then do you want of the status of the last motion that we just passed?
I think that's just a recommendation of how we want to do it. Then there's the recommendation of when and the funding.
And whether it's going to be combined with the Columbus Drive portion?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. People comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yes, and I think, I don't know if we need a separate motion for this, but I would recommend that we do maybe take this off the plan for 2021 and look at a little bit of a larger area. And as Susan said, it gives more people in the community time to comment and provide,
And
you
more
know,
time for us to present it to the community.
right. More communication on both sides to say, this is what we're thinking. They push back and say, well, we don't like this, but maybe if you tweak it this way, there's a better solution. And we end up with a better, we end up with a better solution with more communication. So from a cost estimate standpoint, it sounds like this 2021 is not the year to be trying to get this in.
One question, why was this on the 2021 plan though? Was this part of the road, you know, needing repair? You know, obviously we prioritized it for some reason. So I just want to make sure if we're kicking it down the can that, you know, down the road that it's going to be okay.
I think it was replacement of the cast iron water main. I can't say it won't last another 4 years, but I think that's what tagged it.
There's 6-inch cast iron pipe on the stretch. However, as far as comparability of the road condition compared to the other areas we're replacing, this stretch was not as bad as the rest of the stretches.
Yeah, this pavement's much better.
Well, if we need it quoted just to know something, I don't mind going through the quote process now, but I think realistically, our recommendation is that this is probably going to be looked at a future year, not seriously looked at in 2021.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering, because that gets into scope of work. Should we just remove Mayflower's final design north of Maywood, which probably then should get considered by the council because it's modifying a budgeted project, or design it, allow it to be bid as an alternate, but with an eye toward meeting the budget, it seems unlikely we'll actually build it.
Yeah,
I
I
like
think,
that idea, Sean, because
I think,
the engineer is in process at this point, and to stop it and change it just ends up costing the city more money
Mhm.
in the long run.
Don, I think I was talking over you. Are you suggesting just go ahead and bid it and then as an alternate?
Yeah, as an alternate, because one thing, if we tell the engineer at this point, and they can chime in, but this start and stop of services and change of services midstream just ends up ultimately costing the city more money in services. That somebody will say, well, why did we do that?
Sure. I'm okay with that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to come before Common Council, and they're going to hear, here's why you would save money if you did it now. Here's why you would save money if you combine it with a larger project later on. And they'll have to make a decision of what really saves the most money and what makes the most sense for the project.
Sure.
So I'm fine with quoting it as an alternate. Sean, do you need a formal motion, or does this give you kind of the direction you need?
I think it would be handy as a motion to be able to put it in the minutes.
Do you have a recommendation of what that motion might be?
For, to design and bid as an alternate Mayflower north of Maywood as, a separate alternate scope
As
of project.
as amended by the previous motion.
That would be the motion I am making right this moment.
Okay.
Well said, Robert.
It will have been.
I'll second, Don.
Don? Okay.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. I'm sorry, opposed nay. The ayes have it. Motion is carried.
All right. And I didn't know of any other policy issues. So if the committee doesn't have any other advice toward final design, I think we've got what we need.
Okay.
Sounds good.
You didn't have anything else, Terry, I assume?
No, there was nothing else for this committee.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the evening.
And thank you, Rich.
Yep. Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome. You guys have a great night.
You too.
Yeah. That gets us up to the plan drawings for the North Mendota bike connection, effectively along Century Avenue. Well, part of it's going on right now, but this would get from Allen Court up to the west leg of Highland Way. And we had previously looked at some early drawings all the way up to the east side of the city, but this is just that next segment now at the construction level. In fact, the consultant put it up for bid advertisements last Thursday. So it's out for bid right now. I didn't see anything substantive. I had a few little comments here and there that the designer is going to take care of. But I wanted the committee to have an opportunity to weigh in too on final design. And unfortunately, our project manager couldn't work out a timeline to get this in the right order. So we got these drawings in last Thursday, but I had a chance to look at them quick over the weekend as well. You did too. I don't know if you had anything that caught your eye that we should correct, change.
I didn't have anything about the design drawings, but Sean, are all of the easement things taken care of now with the various apartment complexes along that portion of the route, or are we still working out easements?
I believe that Dan Ramsey and Mark Opitz have negotiated those.
Yeah, easements are in place.
Up to the west portion
Up
of
to Highland Way.
Highland Way. But all of those, whatever there are, 15 properties between the two segments of Highland Way, those are all still open. Is that?
No, I think those are okay.
Those have been
Yeah,
done also?
I can't guarantee anything, but I think all of the areas that we're really concerned about along the North Mendota Trail are taken care of now.
Yeah. The touchy ones were the condominium homeowners associations. I think for the individual property owners between Highland Way and Highland Way, the fact that the city would be maintaining that now was a real plus to those homeowners. So that they didn't have to do snow removal in the winter.
Yeah, so I think we're good on the easement side of
All right,
things.
very good.
Okay.
Well, I didn't see, you know, it's dense information on these 71 pages. So I will admit that I don't necessarily think I caught everything. So, but I would say that, you know, nothing looked problematic to me as I went through it.
Okay. As far as I know, the only thing still being considered is an MG&E relocation at the creek crossing, because we're putting a new bridge across the creek with abutments, and that affects then the need for relocating an MG&E facility. So I think that's the only thing still hanging out there.
Thank you for that reminder.
All right, if there are no questions, does someone have a motion to offer with respect to this design plan approval?
Sure. This is Robert. I would recommend phase 2 plan approval for the North Mendota Trail.
And this is Susan. I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that's already out for bid, right? Sean, you said
They
that?
started advertising last Thursday, yes.
Okay, all right. Very good.
So that brings us up to our last agenda item, which is about our brush collection policy.
Harry, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, you've been waiting.
Yes. Yeah, but I mean, if Sean, if you want to kick it off first, but I can chime in.
Sure. We get, well, as our policy says, in November, we'll do unscheduled collection of brush as crew time allows, and everything else, you know, goes well. But that we don't promise we'll collect any brush at all during the month. I think people are hearing the first part, but not the second part. So people dutifully set brush out at season's end, along with leaves and other things that we've got going on. But we sometimes early in the month can pick up brush, but often late in November we're just done. But our policy says, well, we'll still get it if we can, but then we don't. And it sets us up for a lot of disappointed folks who think they're doing what we've asked them to do, and then we're not holding up our end of the bargain. You know, so we get special requests this time of year. Could you come pick up the brush that we set out in late October or early November that you didn't get? But our trucks are now set up for plowing and salting.
But wait a minute, Sean. That last sentence in November, at this time, trucks are converted for snow and ice control operations. So what do you convert them back for January?
I think they take some of the salting equipment off of one of them so that they can go pick up Christmas trees. So they have to kind of put stuff on and off and on and off. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, you know, I'm not sure people read this kind of thing anyway, but I know the expectation is that you're going to do it. And, you know, my wife put a whole bunch of branches on the terrace in mid-November, and I said, they're not going to go away. And on November 30th, I put them in my car and hauled them to the compost center. But when we took a walk on the 1st and 2nd of December, there were 5 or 6 places between our house and downtown that had considerable amount of brush on the terrace. And a week later, it was gone. So you obviously did a run. So I mean, I think that's where the expectations come from. You know, you're kind of doing it to yourself.
I don't know that we did. I passed these all along to our operations manager, but I think they were so busy with leaf collection, they didn't get brush collected. So I don't know if more homeowners were doing that and or dragging them back to their backyard and waiting for spring.
No, I know one of the locations is right down the street, and there are 2, it's a rental house, and there are 2 resident doctors living there. I know they didn't haul it away.
Okay.
It's been laying in their driveway for, I mean, because they put branches on top of leaves, it was been laying there for a month and a half.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks, John, for bringing this up. Because I think the question you kind of proposed was, should we change our policy to make it more clear when brush collection ends? And I think that would be really good to kind of put a hard stop to it, to say, you know, October 31st it ends, you know, or whatever we want to say with that language, but to not even include November. Or if we're going to include November, then we have to pick it up during November or something, just because I agree it causes confusion, because two of my neighbors, one is 92 years old. He had a big pile of branches out, and I actually think it was mid-October. I'm not exactly sure, but from their perspective, they felt like it should have been picked up in October. But I think our street is usually like the first week in October, so I'm not really sure what happened there. But then they also thought, oh well, I'll put it out in October. If they don't get it in October, they'll get it in November. So and I also have seen same thing, Carl. Down like Kenyon Street, I've seen, you know, some small brush piles and things like that. So I think it would be good to change the language of the policy, and then to, you know, push those notifications out in the fall to kind of remind people when it ends.
And
Gary,
you know, and
I agree with you completely.
I'm kind of on both sides. I know when in 2014 the committee landed on, well, pick it up if you can. That makes some sense. Geez, if we're out trimming a tree or knocking a tree down ourselves, and there happens to be some brush right next to it, why not just pick that up too? The harder part is, like Carl said, well, if you pick up one, why don't you pick up all of them? You know, but we don't have time. We're out of time.
Yeah.
And I didn't think they were picking any up, but I'm not saying for sure that they weren't. But that does become its own problem, you know, because then you're into a game of, well, do you like that person but not this person? You know, and that's even worse.
I agree. I think the policy should be changed, but I think, you know, if we're going to change the policy, it should be consistent. You know, we're going to quit brush at the end of October, and that's it. And so that people's expectations, you know, are consistent.
Yeah. Otherwise, they may be moving their brush twice or something.
Yeah.
And
Being
I
hopeful.
will say, some people have had their brush hauled away by private individuals when the city didn't pick it up. So that can be misleading, but it does happen.
And
But I
my
think there
other
should be-
question. Oh, go ahead, Susan.
No, we just need a consistent stop date.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe what we could do is just remove that November, you know, off this policy completely. So it just says April through October. And then in January, there's the unscheduled collection of holiday trees. And that's my next question is, my neighbors asked, well, since they come to pick up the Christmas trees, will they come pick up the brush too? And I see that it says if it's not snow covered or frozen to the ground.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. Is that true, Sean? Like, will they pick up brush too, along with a holiday tree?
You know, I don't know to what degree that kicks in. Clearly the intention isn't, boy, if you'll fill up a 90-foot long terrace with branches, we'll just come get them all. It's intended that they can cycle through the city really quickly, just picking up trees.
Yeah.
Instead of like a tangled mess of branches that may or may not be, some of them frozen in. But I think if there are
snowdrift.
Yeah, but if there are boughs and branches incidental, I gotta believe they would just get them. Maybe that should be rephrased a little bit, but that's
what I was wondering. Yeah.
So yeah, this is Robert. I don't want to disagree with everybody speaking, because but I do say that we live in a state where snow comes and you don't always know when it's going to be. And I don't want to just say, well, we stop picking up brush at October 31st, because I think that's doing a disservice to our citizens. But to say we will guarantee we'll do it to the end of to November 30th is also setting us up for failure. So I think there still has to be kind of a shifting target here. But what I might recommend is one added sentence to the November statement, and then a little bit of a rearranging of the remaining sentences. So here's what I came up with. New sentence at the very front. Brush may or may not be collected in November. And then now we go into the rearrangement. There is no guarantee that brush will be collected during this month. Brush collection in November is a lower priority than leaf collection. And then it continues on with the rest of it. Collection ends following the season's first snow accumulation, but no later than the end of November. At this time, trucks are converted for snow and ice control operations. It doesn't change what we're doing at all, but it maybe makes it a little bit more clear what the intent is, which is you get to November and you haven't had stuff picked up, there's no guarantees.
So what do people do if they put a whole bunch of stuff on the terrace and it doesn't get picked up?
In my case, what happened at my house maybe 2 years ago is I had stuff under the snow all winter. I also, maybe just this last year, my next door neighbor who has a truck said, "Hey, Robert, you have some brush there, and I'm taking my stuff because I don't think it's going to get picked up. Mind if do you want me to grab it for you?" And so this year I got a little favor from my neighbor, but 2 years ago I had brush under snow for the whole winter on the terrace.
Or you could also have a very generous alder who had it picked up.
Maybe a really generous alder with a car bigger than a Honda Fit.
Yeah,
well,
right.
This was a landscaping person that picked it up at my instruction.
Nice.
And
the problem, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carrie, I'm through.
Oh, okay. The problem I was going to say is that for this month of November, there wasn't any snow. It seems perfectly logical that brush collection would be picked up. And so I think that's the problem, is like the citizens think, oh, there's been no snow, they'll come get my brush in November.
Yeah.
So, it says it's may or may not, and I understand that there's leaf collection, but I think it's too complicated of a message to send, because they don't understand if they're picking up leaves, how come they can't pick up brush too? Like, they probably don't understand it's a staffing limitation or whatever it might be. I think in their minds, they're like, it's nice outside, there's no snow, why aren't they picking up my brush? And I also get the leaf collection alerts sent to me via email, and it's really nice when it says end of leaf collection, right? Like there's no more, like it's ending. Whereas if you have the November message, I don't know, I guess you could send out, it may or may not happen, but it's just kind of nice to have a hard stop.
Like if you set it out, we might not pick it up. Yeah.
Right.
It's an odd message. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do get it, but I don't want to also say that we're going to definitely pick up by November 30th, because if we get a mid-November hard snow, and I know it hasn't happened in the last few years, but that's going to screw up our plans. And like I said, I'm one of those people who do put stuff out like the first week of November still, because that's when I can start trimming some trees a little bit. And you know, if so, just I don't want to move the hard date too early to the end of October, but I don't know that how far we can go into November and guarantee that the trucks won't have to be converted over to snow.
And if you remember last year, we had 7 inches of snow on Halloween.
Right.
I mean, we're victims of climate here, and it's pretty tough to write policies that say we'll do this on such and such a schedule in these months and that some other time, because you are always subject to what the weather is.
Could I make a suggestion in Robert's statements that we make real clear, all the collections are weather dependent. This is what we're trying to do. But I also have another question for you, Sean. I've always wondered if the limitation, is it staffing or is it number of trucks in terms of do we have an extra truck that could still be used for brush collection without it being converted over to snow removal? And do we have enough staff to take care of that truck if we did that?
I think once we get into winter, we're picking up holiday trees, right? It's not a staffing issue, because either we're plowing or we can be out trimming trees and chipping them up. You know, because we do have to do some equipment changes to that one truck, but everything else is still set up, ready to go. And we just keep an eye on the forecast and we say, look, we're not going to be plowing, let's go do trees for a bit. In November, our problem is staffing, because we're picking up leaves, and we're not doing anything but picking up leaves. When they fall down and people are raking them out, our whole crew is doing that.
Okay. So
and that's not a
both.
truck issue, that's a personnel issue.
So we need both, actually, to really do this service well for our citizens.
Well, I guess where I would head is if we can give people a warning in September that, you know, you've had April and May and June and July and August. We're coming down to it. If you want to trim something, do it on your assigned week in October, or feel free to cut it down in November, but just let it in your backyard till April. You know, and just don't put it out.
I'm asking from a slightly different point of view.
And
I'm asking as information I could take to council in terms of, we need another crew person and a truck so that we can really serve our citizens well on this service that they expect and we aren't doing well on.
Well, brush takes at least 2 people, but it would seem kind of expensive to add 2 crew people to pick up brush for a month, rather than just focus whatever effort we can on what has to be done. So in October, I'm fine with saying our priority is brush and we'll pick up leaves as they come. But once November hits, that's what we're doing. We're picking up leaves. Even potholes wait. We just don't do them. Well,
okay.
For the most part.
Then we need a really clear policy that makes it clear that it's truly weather permitting and you're really lucky if you get something picked up in November.
And that's what we have right now, except it's not being read that way. And
well,
that's why we have disappointed people, you know, and I get it.
Written so it can be read that way.
You can write it any way you want, but I think one of the problems is a large number of people who put brush out on their terraces with the expectation that it's going to be picked up have never read the existing policy and
right.
read the new one.
Yeah. I mean, this already says we have other priorities. We're subject to the weather. Sometimes things break, you know, and we may not get anything during November. And routinely at the end of November, we have questions wondering why we didn't get brush.
I
I
like
think we
Robert's
try as best we
edits.
can.
Yeah, I like your edits, Robert, that you proposed. And then maybe, I don't know, in the fall newsletter or other avenues next fall, we can try to publicize this a little bit more to say there's no guarantee in November.
Yeah.
We absolutely
Sean?
can do that. I just, you know, I'm only here to say that the kind of message we'd be sending out is, if you set brush out in November, we may or may not get it. And
Yeah.
when we do, it isn't because we like that person, but we don't like you very much, so we didn't get your brush. That's not it. It's just that we ran out of time or didn't.
Yeah.
I feel like we already have that message here. If I guess my question is, my wording was to try to make it a little bit more clear, but I'm not really changing the intent, which is we may or may not get it in November because it's a lower priority and we got to switch over our trucks to snow at some point. I just re-highlighted the words. Now, Sean, I just want to double check with what you're saying is, are you potentially asking us to go away, you know, do a pretty drastic change, which really is we have a hard date of October 31st, and after that, we will not do this?
From my perspective, yes, that brings certainty to it and just says, look, we're on a schedule through the end of October, and then we're done.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be my preference because, yeah,
I think
remove
people
the
might get it
November
out
paragraph.
then. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think then it's just removing that confusion. And plus, if it's not happening anyways, would anyone be disappointed? Do you know what I mean? Because it sounds like at least this November, brush didn't get collected.
Oh, it did.
It did.
It may not have gotten collected, you know, the last week in November, but it was still, brush was still being picked up. And I'm not opposed to this. I will say that it throws off my plans a little bit just because I try not to trim like my oak trees or whatever. I don't like doing it in the spring because the ground's mushy, and so I do a lot of my trimming stuff, you know, mid-November if I'm going to trim something.
Robert, you should be trimming your oak trees next week.
So I'm already doing it too soon if I do it in November?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. It probably explains some tree damage.
But I also think that causes citizens to be upset with the city if it is happening in some areas and not in the others. And so I think that's where we should say, you know, it ends in October, get your stuff out before then.
Okay.
Because I mean, there were significant piles. Like, it wasn't just like a little brush pile in my neighbor. Again, he was 92. I felt so bad for him because it was basically half his driveway was covered in brush. So he would have to, like, you know, and he hired somebody to remove it.
Sure.
So I don't know. It's just, I think they were pretty upset with that.
I'm okay with this direction too. I think it is cleaner, but here's the caveat I'm going to throw out there. Are there going to be, how much pushback is there going to be to say, well, you know, can you just go do it? And if we say no, the answer has to be no. We can't say, here's the hard date, and then have 2 or 3 weeks into November, have people still kind of picking up the brush. If we say a hard date, it's got to be that real hard date.
I think Sean can do that.
I agree, because waffling, I mean, this hasn't really gotten us anywhere, but it has caused some resentment, you know, that I did what I was supposed to and you didn't. And you know, I don't really treasure that either. I mean, I feel for Carrie's neighbor. The problem gets into if you say, oh, just come on, guys, just one more.
Right.
You know, at some point, well, I remember the reason this was written with sort of a hard end on leaf collection at the same time was because we had just suffered an early snowstorm and none of our trucks were ready to go.
Sure.
And we said, we got to pick a date and stop picking up leaves.
What if you just, where you have April/October, schedule collection once per month by areas noted below? and then put November through March, brush will not be collected. And then add just under that, the sentence, unscheduled collection of holidays, trees will be made as crew time and weather permit. And then instead of saying branches, say brush.
Or
Brush stacked at the curb will also be collected during this time, if not snow covered and frozen to the ground.
Or maybe should we just skip that reference to brush or branches and just say holiday trees will be collected as true time and weather permit, if not snow covered or frozen to the ground?
yes.
I agree
Yeah.
with
I
that.
agree.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
I'd like to make a motion to minimize the verbiage here and state clearly that we'll clean up brush through the end of October, and we'll have a January holiday tree pickup, and we won't say anything else.
Except say November through March, brush will not be picked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to drive a lot of people to get
Just
it done.
eliminate the November paragraph.
Yeah, and then people can always do it on their own if they're convinced they want to do some trimming in November. There can be a pickup, or they can wait till spring, or let the brush sit on the ground till spring, something like that.
Yeah, I've had stuff sit just in the backyard, and
But I
in
think it's much
spring I
better
pull
to
it
say
out.
it's just not going to be done November through March, except for picking up holiday trees in January.
Mm-hmm. The
The
question
only
I have,
thing with Bob is like, if someone sees brush collection seasons, they might only read April through October and November through March. They might not even read, you know what I mean? Like
that there's
Yeah.
none.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
almost think you should just leave those off. And then that way, if someone's just glancing at this for 2 seconds, they see brush collection, April through October.
I agree. I think we leave
Okay.
April through October just as it is. I say we strike the whole paragraph related to November. I say we probably actually leave January in there because I think that is important to say January,
Yeah.
and just that first.
Eliminate
just-
the second sentence in January.
Right, just the first sentence. Thank you. That's what I was going for also. Eliminate the second sentence there. And then if you wanted to have anything, don't put, you could just have a statement that doesn't have a month next to it that just says, note, no brush pickup will occur between November through March. And that would have.
Yeah.
Robert, you could put that right after the sentence in the April to October section, saying scheduled collection once per month is noted below. Brush will not be collected November through March.
And make it bold.
yeah,
Yeah.
very nice. So
Okay.
that's my motion now.
Excellent. I will second Dan's brilliant motion.
All right, we have a motion, and we're going to take out the second sentence in the January one too, about
Yes.
brushes,
Correct.
branches stacked.
Well, little caveat. I liked what Sean said, which is actually take the if not snow covered or frozen to the ground and tack that onto the holiday tree pickup.
Yeah,
Yes.
so we could just strike what's highlighted in blue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will revise the policy accordingly.
Great.
All right, and that was the last thing on our agenda. Now, before we adjourn, I wanted to ask too if there's likely to be a quorum on December 28th. My first guess is that there would not be.
I will not be available.
I can make
I'm
myself
not going
unavailable.
anywhere.
Yeah, none of
I
us are
would-
going anywhere.
Are you anticipating that you've got stuff for an agenda on the 28th?
I don't yet. I just didn't know if anybody would be interested or if they'd rather
I would
sort
say
of take the
I'm-
holiday off.
I would say I'm not interested. If I had to come back for it, well, I'm not going anywhere either. But if I had to sit down in a Zoom meeting that night, I could do it. But I would prefer to have that time off until January.
Okay.
That would be fine, but I mean, I'm not going anywhere either, and I wouldn't mind doing it on December 28th if it would mean we don't have a 4-hour meeting on the second Monday in January.
We do have
That I agree to.
a fair amount already lined up for the second Monday in January because we've got the downtown street construction project, final design / go, no go decision, and then final design for the Hubbard Mayflower project.
I will
And-
be here in December.
I'm sorry, Carl?
I will be around in December.
You will, okay. So if something comes up, I'll just keep you up to date on whether there is or is not an agenda. It sounds like we could have a quorum if needed.
It sounds
so.
like there would be a quorum.
Yeah.
If you
Okay.
needed to get a couple items out of the way.
Okay.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's the end of the agenda then.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to
I'll
adjourn.
second.
Is there a second?
Oh, I think Dan already
Carrie,
did.
I'll
Sorry,
second.
Carrie.
Oh,
I
sorry.
I got Cody.
Seconded to adjourn. Is there any discussion?
No.
Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we are adjourned. Thank you all for a long and at times somewhat arduous meeting this evening. I
But it
hope
was
you
good.
all have a good holiday season, and maybe we'll see you on the 28th, or maybe we'll see you next year. But in any event, thanks for this evening's work.
Thanks
Very
Bob.
much. Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Yep.
You too.
So
Bye,
Susan,
everyone.
Susan, are you gonna make me a Nisa?
I might if you're really nice.